Welcome to the webinar Energy Efficiency Actions in Denmark, Copenhagen and Nordhavn, hosted by the Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency. We are pleased that more than 150 participants have registered for this webinar. My name is Ksenia Petrichenko and I'm a researcher at the Copenhagen Centre, which conducts research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and serves as Energy Efficiency Hub for Sustainable Energy for All initiative. This webinar is part of Think Globally, Act Locally webinar series, which aims at exploring different levels of policy development and implementation and links between them. It will look at how high-level targets and policies get translated into local actions and vice versa. We plan to have at least 4 more webinars during 2017 highlighting experiences from different countries and cities around the world. Today is our first webinar in this series, and we will talk about Sustainable Development Goals, experiences from Denmark and Copenhagen, and a very interesting district in Copenhagen, Nordhavn. Now I would like to introduce our speakers today. We have Mark Lister, who is the acting head of the Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency, and he leads the work of the Centre and coordinates collaborations with Global Efficiency Accelerator Platform and many other partners. We have Helle Momsen Fredslund, who is an advisor at the Danish Energy Agency under the Ministry of Energy Supply and Climate. She works with a team for global cooperation, which collaborates with 12 countries sharing Danish experiences on the green transition. We're delighted to have Morten Kabell, who is the Mayor of Technical and Environmental Affairs of Copenhagen, and he is also a board member of Copenhagen City and Port Development. Morten's vision is to transform Copenhagen into a greener city with a high level of livability, and his political focus is to change traffic in Copenhagen so more people can use bicycles and public transportation. We also have Torben Ommen today. He's a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the Technical University of Denmark. He is an expert on modeling and optimization of energy systems, and today he will introduce us to the project at Nordhavn district. So this is our today's agenda, and after this brief introduction and welcome, we will hear from Mark, who will talk about Sustainable Development Goals and implementation of SDG 7. Then we'll hear from Helle about the success story of energy efficiency policy development in Denmark. Morten will introduce us to Copenhagen as a flagship city on energy efficiency actions. And at the end, we will hear about the showcase of Energy Lab Nordhavn project on cost-effective smart energy system presented by Torben. We will conclude with questions and answer session. So please feel free to post your questions anytime during the webinar using the question function on your GoToWebinar panel. And please indicate which speaker you would like to address your question to. I would like to draw your attention that the Copenhagen Centre is hosting various thematic webinars on a regular basis, and all materials from the previous webinars you can find on Knowledge Management System, following by this link below. You will also see a shortcut for this webinar series once you click on our e-learning section. And all presentations and the recording of this webinar will be uploaded there within several days. So with this, I would like to give the floor to Mark Lister. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ksenia, and I'm very pleased to be able to open this series that we'll be hosting throughout this year on the issue of Think Global and Act Local. Increasingly, we see that there's some interesting issues coming up at this question of how to bring global goals down to the local level. So I think it's a very topical and interesting subject that we wish to explore. And my role here is to provide some global context in terms of the overall global goals and the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. Many of you on the line may no doubt be aware of the commitment made in September 2015 to 17 overarching sustainable development goals. And within that, in particular, of interest in our field, in energy, is Goal 7, which is about ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all. This is a goal that's articulated further into 3 sub-goals, including, as it says at the top, about global vision down to local action. Taking it down, the next level is about universal access to modern energy services, doubling the rate globally of energy efficiency improvement, and also doubling the rate of renewable energy in the global energy mix. So these are high-level goals set underneath Sustainable Development Goal 7, and Sustainable Energy for All, which is at the top of the page there, is really the organisation internationally set up to look at delivering on this Sustainable Development Goal 7. We also saw international commitments established through the Paris Agreement on climate change, and the agreement that was made there with 191 countries signing on really cemented these goals and put in place through the process of nationally determined contributions some more national level goals as to what might be done to achieve these sustainable development goals. Some of the targets include targets on reaching temperature goals, in particular to limit the increase in global warming to 2 degrees and doubling efforts to move towards 1.5 degrees this century. Also through the nationally determined contributions, a range of emissions objectives and also some statements about equality and sharing of the burden. And all of that adds up to a really large group of commitments and a huge level of sort of global focus on these areas of sustainable energy for all. And there's I have just actually come back from the Sustainable Energy for All Forum in New York City just yesterday, and there was some material released there about how we're going towards these overall global targets. I thought it would be worth showing this audience the short video that was produced towards that target. I'm not sure that the sound will be able to be heard. Okay, I'm getting the message that it maybe cannot be heard, but it will certainly be distributed to you so you can see the video. But overall, what it's showing is that we still have a gap. Whilst we've made some good progress towards energy efficiency, there is certainly a gap that needs to be filled if we're to reach the aspirations of the Paris Agreement. I'd like to draw your attention to the Emissions Gap Report, which is a report produced by the UN Environment Programme in which we have some involvement, that really studies what the level of commitment has been under the international goals of the Paris Agreement and how that compares to the overall target that was set to limit global warming to 2 degrees and then looking towards 1.5 degrees. So this is an interesting report, and on your screens you can see one of the key charts from this report. It really outlines what the sum total of current commitments are under the national commitments that have been made towards global goals, which presents the unconditional INDC case that you can see marked as an orange line coming out from the chart of trajectories of emissions. And there's also a conditional INDC case, which is that some commitments were made conditionally on other conditions being met. So these are the international targets, the level that we've reached. This is well below the level that's required to reach the 1.5 degree range in terms of the emission cuts required, and it's actually quantified in the Emissions Gap Report that somewhere between 12 and 14 gigatons per year is the gap. This is the amount that we still need to do beyond what current targets are. Should we be able to reach 2 degrees? To reach 1.5 degrees, it's even bigger, as a gap between 15 and 17 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. So there's some substantial ground to make up over and above these global targets as expressed by Sustainable Development Goals, both Sustainable Development Goal 7 and the Paris Agreement. And in terms of, I suppose, our area of energy efficiency, the GAP report also goes on to say that we have opportunities for using cost-effective energy efficiency measures that can more than make up for this gap. In fact, buildings have estimated unrealized potential of 30 gigatons, industry 22 gigatons, and transport 12 gigatons. So we can actually bridge the gap and do it in a way that remains economically competitive more than once over, using the existing opportunities in energy efficiency. But we recognise and we know that governments can't reach this potential on their own through these nationally expressed targets, and you know, we actually need to look at the work that has to be done now to bring new partners to the table and have local expression of these national targets, which is, I guess, the basis for our subject matter today and the webinar that we're running. The question of how to engage with more local actors, including municipal governments, including property developers and businesses, looking at how these roles can actually be put back into these global efforts to make sure that we capture, I suppose, the possibility and the potential of energy efficiency. And just to finish on the gap report, the emissions gap report, there is already an estimate in there of what private sector can bring to the table, and it's a few gigatons of CO2, remembering that the gap is 12 to 14 gigatons. It's a significant contribution already to this area, but we know it needs to go further, and we need to work harder on taking global goals and expressing them through local actions and local partnerships. Just to a couple more pieces of background on the global goals and how they relate to the subject that we're talking about today. And what we've seen is a huge investment coming through the pipeline into clean energy sources. As the slide says, we're already seeing $221 billion per annum going into energy efficiency projects. This is forecast. The existing effort is forecast to change the direction that we're heading from this set of global goals expressed through the Paris Agreement down to, in this case, the chart that you can see it refers to a bridge scenario of which is developed by the International Energy Agency, looking at what we could realistically do using available technologies today. And achieving that bridge scenario relies more or less half on energy efficiency. So 49% of the opportunities that we're expecting to see taken in the next 15 years or so, or 13 years, come back to energy efficiency. So energy efficiency is a big part of the pie there. It's a big part of the energy objectives that we have, and in a sense, energy efficiency deserves to be, I guess, brought forward and front-loaded onto the energy goals overall of the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. It's worth mentioning about the Sustainable Development Goals that there are 17 of these goals, and energy is just one. But we know that energy has a direct impact on many of the other goals. Certainly the goals around livability, cities and livelihoods, goals around health when it comes to certain issues around air pollution and so on, certainly climate goals and others. So energy has a direct or a sort of an underpinning role in some of these other goals. So we believe that energy goals could also be front-loaded and prioritised and fast-tracked to reach all of the other Sustainable Development Goals. Breaking it down further, there's a lot of work being done as well about where the opportunities are, and we've seen you know, a lot of commentary about this in terms of where the target needs to be. But certainly there's opportunities across the board: heating and cooling, appliances and lighting, industrial motors, and also transport. In very many parts of the world, a lot of the larger countries are where effort is where it now needs to be focused. But again, in these larger countries, the difficulty of translating national goals down to local actions becomes even more important with so many local actors that we're talking about. So just to maybe come back in the few minutes I have left to our role and the sorts of things that we do in the Copenhagen Centre. Ksenia mentioned in the introduction that we are the Global Energy Efficiency Hub of sustainable energy for all for the overall achievement of SDG 7. And we're set up as a joint venture between the UN Environment Programme, the Technical University of Denmark, and the Government of Denmark. And we do a range of things to help achieve policy change in countries and cities, accelerate energy efficiency through innovation in delivery, and overall raising the profile of energy efficiency through the communicating about the opportunities and supporting outreach programs. Some of our activities include building the evidence base, which we've done through a range of publications and analytical pieces, looking at what opportunities there are. Increasingly, we're in the business of reaching out and connecting stakeholders and creating partnerships on the ground. And this is something that increasingly we do through our Energy Efficiency Accelerator platform. I'll talk more about them in just a moment. We're also active in finance and unlocking finance for projects as they come through. We at the moment work with governments and cities and countries to look at what their plans are in the context of global goals, and then as they articulate those plans, we connect them to our network of advisors and technology and service providers in an effort to help them make their plans a reality. And increasingly as well, we have to look at how we're tracking towards the goals and what is working and what is not working, so we can communicate that and replicate and scale up progress. This slide just has a picture of some of our recent work in various cities. We're working with governments in, the pictures are some of our publications, one that we launched just this week about good practice in China. We have a picture there of a city in Russia that we're doing some work with. And there's also a picture of a workshop which we're very engaged in outreach through assisting directly with particular issues, for example, on building codes, appliance standards, those kinds of things. So these are some of the things that we do. We're very engaged with a lot of the different players in energy efficiency internationally. There's some more detail there of what I'm describing in terms of the networks that we have, and I won't go through every detail of this, but the slides will be available to you. We see ourselves as acting as a hub, if you like, between the demand for energy efficiency support and technical providers of that, so between demand and supply. The diagram you can currently see is a more detailed exposition of that and the process that we go through with governments to actually take them from, I guess, ambitions and statements towards the achievement of energy efficiency goals, and then how we actually articulate targets and go through the process of matching with partners that we can bring to the table. So this is some of the work that we do directly with governments, cities and subnational and national governments at the moment. Our network of partners includes all the partners within Sustainable Energy for All, and this includes, as I've said, countries and city governments, certainly a range of companies that are involved with us and looking to help to bring their expertise and open up new markets. We also, as a hub of Sustainable Energy for All, we have access and networks with all of the other partners to Sustainable Energy for All, which include regional development banks, the World Bank, others who are active in renewable energy, for example, many international organisations that we have good links with. I mentioned our accelerator platform briefly, and this is our key outreach and implementation network headed in different sectors by different organisations, both within the UN system and from the private sector. These organisations lead partnerships in the key energy using sectors of buildings, district energy, lighting, vehicle fuel efficiency, industrial energy efficiency, and with appliances and equipment. So we use those partnerships to, I guess, engage governments and try and help them articulate their plans and work through what we know works in taking the high impact opportunities in each of those sectors. We act as a secretariat to this platform, and we also assist the platform with some content and I guess communicating where there's synergies between different sectors and creating coordination overseen by the Sustainable Energy for All team, the global team which is based in Vienna. So that's a broad overview of our approach to the global goals and the achievement of global goals. We're very keen and interested to hear about and learn from countries and cities who are interested to take energy efficiency further. And we're based, the last picture that I have is based on it's our office where we are in Copenhagen, which is in Nordhavn. And I'm really glad that as the first webinar in this series, we've got representation from our hosts, our local country folk in the Danish government and the city of Copenhagen and Nordhavn. To see the video that I had and that you'll get distributed, which was just released, you'll see that Denmark is truly a leader in this space and has a lot to offer at all levels of government by way of example to other interested governments to learn from. So I'm really, really pleased that we can introduce the work of Denmark as a way into this question of devolving global goals to the national level and then to local action. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, and that's a great link to our next presentation, which will be given by Helle about the national level actions on energy efficiency in Denmark. Helle, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining. My name is Helle Momsen Fredslund and I'm from the Danish Energy Agency. Just to give you an understanding of where I'm from, then the Danish Energy Agency is an agency under the Danish Ministry of Energy, Utilities and Climate. And what we do is that we engage nationally and internationally in the production, supply and consumption of energy. And we also have a focus on greenhouse gas emissions. And an interesting thing about the Danish Energy Agency is that it was established back in the 1976. So there's a lot of years of experience in this house where I'm based. What we do is that you can see this on the screen, it's just a fast overview of what we are working with. In the agency, we also have 12 partner countries. So we collaborate with the countries that you can see on the screen. It's everything from energy efficiency in buildings, industry, to flexible power plants, scenario analysis, anything that is important for green transition. I don't know what country you're from, but maybe you'll find yourself here. Maybe you're one of our partners. In Denmark, yes. In Denmark, I'll give you an overview of our energy efficiency. We have managed to decouple our energy consumption from our economic growth. So the blue graph you see is our GDP, our growth, and then our energy intensity have decreased and our energy use have also decreased through the years, and of course also our greenhouse gas emissions. Energy efficiency have improved a lot, both in the end use and also in our energy supply. And then during the last 20 years, we have had a larger share of renewables in our energy system. Energy efficiency has delivered. It has been key to get this decoupling. In the end use, there's been a very much decrease in buildings with insulation, much more efficient appliances, and then industries that are much more efficient. In our supply of energy, we have gained a lot through combined heat and power. Maybe Morten will mention how many percentage of combined heat and power there is in Copenhagen, but I think in Denmark it's around 60%. So we have very high efficiency here. And more efficient power plants, individual boilers, and of course renewable energies, especially wind. One of the keys to get this decoupling of economic growth and the use of energy, a very important fundament for that have been our stable policy frameworks. We had the first energy plan in 1976, and that was also the year the Danish Energy Agency was established. So we made the first, and there have been several since then. But the planning and the coordination is very important. So if you want to remember one thing, if you're a politician or influencing politicians, then long-term stable policy frameworks is a key. And this is important for investors. This is important that it is a broad coalition, so that the rules and the targets doesn't change when the government is changing. And then to have policies and measures that are effective, it's important to use them in combination. I'll get more into that now. But in the graph in the top, you can see how our division of energy sources was in the 70s. And then in the graph underneath, you can see how it has changed a lot. This is energy. So if it was only electricity, renewables would have a much larger share. I believe that 2 years ago or last year, we had 42% of electricity from wind power. So what I want to talk about is the measures in Denmark. So it's the actions that we have made. We have put taxes on energy and CO2 emissions. This is to ensure that the consumption will be reduced. Then we also used regulations such as standards and norms. This done especially within the buildings and on products. Since the 70s, information campaign, awareness raising amongst the Danes have been a very important part of it. Since the 70s, we have had these information campaigns running continuously. It can be hard to evaluate the specific impact of such campaigns, but it's very important to have this fundamental understanding of the importance of the environment and why to be energy efficient. And I think Danes have a very high environmental awareness, and I think all these campaigns have definitely contributed to that. And then there should also be some kind of support to actually implement these savings, and we've done that by putting obligations on the energy providers, making agreements with the industry on how much they should reduce the energy consumption, how they should be more efficient, and then on the other hand giving them subsidies, and then also giving clear codes and help with implementation in the existing buildings, and also for private enterprises. So it's important to use these different measures in combination. We talk a lot about carrot and stick. So maybe if you want to decrease, then you put a tax on the energy use, but if you then fulfill some certain energy obligations or energy efficiency measures, then you can get a reduction in the tax. Some specific examples, I mentioned the products and appliances earlier. There's an EU regulation on this, which we're following and continuously developing. And I think in 2020, all the pluses that you see in the picture on the side will be removed. And there's also a global cooperation on products and appliances. I think most of you in your countries there is at least work with minimum energy performance standards, MIPS. And these are used, you use these appliances to make sure that you remove all the bad products so that the consumer can actually only buy a certain range of products. Of course, in some countries they can be challenged with what is already existing out there and how to take care of that, but at least it's a good starting point. So labels can promote the good, and they can be very cost effective. So it is an important place to start, and it's good if you can harmonize it in regions. New buildings. In Denmark, we have experience with that. Whenever we do build buildings, we want to make sure that they are as energy efficient as possible, because retrofitting can be expensive and challenging. So in Denmark, we have had great success with building codes. You can see in the graph how we have reduced our energy consumption per square meter along the years, and this has been contributed, or the contribution to this has definitely come from the building codes. The building codes are formulated in close collaboration with the private sector, and we make sure that we announce the codes early, both so that the industry can adapt to it, but also in order to architects, etc., to be able actually to build after the new standards earlier than it's mandatory. From 2020, the tentative aim is that all new buildings should be nearly zero energy, with very low consumption and maybe some renewable energy production in the house. And of course, enforcement is important. One thing is to have a building code, very important that people know how to use it and that it's actually enforced and used. And then there's many ways you can do that by making controls and take samples. The existing building block. I think in almost every country this is a challenge. You can see in the graph how much potential there still is in Denmark and how we hope that we will get so much more renovated along the years towards 2050. So as part of the building regulation, then when you do an energy renovation, part of it also, when you do renovations, part of it also has to be energy renovations. There are different demands on that. And the components that you use has to have a holistic impact on the energy consumption in your building. And also, you should look at the life cycle of the products that you use. So this is something that is looked further into in the future. So one thing is the house you built, but also it's the whole life cycle, energy consumption of the products and the end life of the building. And again, a combination of measures towards existing buildings are important. So strong requirements in the building code to make sure that it's enforced, make it easy, like make sure that the building code is easy understandable, that it doesn't work against other regulations, and make sure that the craftsmen, architects, etc., who has to implement it is educated in it, and maybe that they have a hotline that they can actually call. This has been very effective in Denmark. And then if there can be some financing and economic incentives to actually do renovations, to get energy labelings of your building, this is something that we're looking very much into in Denmark as well. And as we're starting with it, we had some challenge in the beginning, but I think energy labeling of buildings will be very important in the future for the future renovation buildings. Energy efficiency obligations. So in order to make the distribution companies of energy have an energy efficiency target, we have, in collaboration with the Danish Energy Association, made energy efficiency obligations. So that we put targets on how much energy savings the sector should deliver. And then they can only sign in what savings have actually been realized. So they go out to their customers, those who they sell electricity to, and there are some advisors who help them find the energy efficiency opportunities. They have a large freedom in that. There are certain demands on how they have to report on it, but it has shown very effective, especially within the industry. So you can get funding to actually find the energy efficiency low-hanging fruits that are there and grow out time and time again. This has also been a very cost-effective measure in Denmark, and it has just been evaluated, and a new program has begun until 2020. So I showed you a lot of different policy measures, and I don't have much time today, so it was a challenge, which one should I choose? But in this timeline, you see a lot of information, but you also see a lot of years. As I said, we started in the 70s. So it can take time, but our experience is that stable policy framework and combination of measures is very important to get the energy efficiency, to meet the energy efficiency targets that you put in your national plans. One thing that I didn't mention in my previous slide is a voluntary agreement scheme, which has also been a success, where we make voluntary agreements with the industry. So they say, I'll reduce this much of my energy consumption, and then they select and identify energy efficiency projects in their production, for instance, and then if they enforce it, then they will get a tax reimbursement. Otherwise, there will be tax on the energy that they use. But if they will fulfill this plan, this energy efficiency target that they set, then they can get a reimbursement. This has also been very successful, and it's still running. Of course, energy management is also very important. I think actually the previous thing before ISO 501 was established in Denmark and then further developed. So energy management is very strongly implemented in Denmark. Maybe Morten will also tell something about that. But this gives you a fast overview of some of the energy efficiency measures that have been used in Denmark. So the development until 2020 and then to 2050. As you can see in the graph underneath, then energy efficiency and an electrification of the energy system is crucial. Energy efficiency can be very cost effective. It has many benefits, so it is a focus that is definitely very important for Denmark as well. The European aim is to have 80 to 95% reduction in the greenhouse gases in 2050. The Danish aim is to be fossil fuel independent by 2050. So the primary energy will have to be reduced, and that can be done through energy efficiency. And then also the share of renewables will have to increase. And there's another talk of getting that whole system integrated. Energy security is key. There is scarcity of resources, also biomass, which is an important interface resource. And again, energy efficiency is a solution. Competitiveness to increase. There are increased energy prices, and you as a nation, as an industry, more robust if you are more efficient, and of course you can have a higher productivity. What is currently guiding the Danish Energy Agency and the Danish government is the Danish Energy Agreement from 2012. We want to be dependent. And here you can see what are like the main goals. One thing we can mention is that 50% of electricity should be supplied from wind power, and that there should be a significant reduction in our gross energy consumption in relation to 2010. So these are some of the goals that we're working on, but 2020, as you all know, is very, very close by. So we are in the process of developing making the fundament for the next energy agreement, which will be really interesting. This is how this share of electricity will look. So this was what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for listening. I would say that my key point is that a decarbonization of the energy sector is necessary, it's key, and energy is important, energy efficiency is important, and that policies are needed. The market will not deliver it by itself. It is important to incentivize and have that combination of measures of carrots and stick that motivate this possibility that energy efficiency does contain. We, as the Danish Energy Agency, have, as you saw, our 12 partner countries, and to them we have developed different toolkits and different reports on subjects. Within energy efficiency, we have one on buildings and an industry and district heating, or combined heat and power, but also many other subjects that are relevant for a green transition. And you can find that on the link that you see there. Then we also, Denmark's national green platform is called State of Green, and if you're looking more for specific solutions, they are also a very good source of inspiration. And then they also have different, they call them white papers, and there are some on energy efficiency, also on buildings and district heating. So if you're interested in more information, except all of what C2E2 also have to offer, the Energy Efficiency Hub, then these are some of the opportunities. So this was all from me. Now I would like to give the floor to our Mayor of the Environment, Morten Kabell. So I'll give the screen to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helle, for a very excellent and interesting presentation. I'll give a brief talk about Copenhagen and what we're doing as a city. Because whether it's New York, Bristol, Singapore, Beijing, or Copenhagen, cities across the globe are taking action to become drivers of a more sustainable future. It's not because we're smarter in the cities, it's basically because we're closer to our citizens. Cities are currently responsible for around 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. And by 2050, 70% of the world's population will live in cities. This puts an enormous responsibility on the shoulders of mayors around the world. Obviously, our national and international counterparts are doing what they can. The UN goals for sustainable development and the Danish goals for energy production are good examples. But often, cities are better equipped to adapting to changed circumstances and also to do it faster than nations. But let me focus on Copenhagen. And here, the figure 0 is quite important because this is our goal. We will become the world's first carbon neutral capital by 2025. We talk about a net zero in 9 years' time. Not 80 by 50, as so many cities, great cities around the world are doing. We are talking net zero in 9 years' time. We are well on our way. We have divided the time frame into 4-year terms, and since our baseline in 2005, we're now in the middle of the second roadmap of around 120 concrete initiatives. So far, we have reduced carbon emissions by just around 40%. And at the same time, the Copenhagen economy has actually flourished at the same time. The clean tech and green industries have grown, and we have developed ways for Copenhageners to choose sustainable alternatives for transport, such as bicycles over cars. But of course, energy is the key part to going carbon neutral. And over the past 30 years, we have developed what I would say a highly efficient district heating system that today covers 98% of the heat supply. Combined heat and power plants have been added to this system. That includes both incinerating waste and biomass, which together deliver very high levels of energy efficiency and low levels of carbon emissions. And we are constantly developing more efficient ways of distributing and producing heating in our system. One example is the conversion from steam to water-based district heating. In 2012, just approximately 20% of all buildings in Copenhagen were supplied by district heating based on steam. But the Greater Copenhagen Utilities is currently transforming the areas that are supplied by steam-based district heating to water-based district heating. The replacement of steam is an essential part of the Copenhagen Climate Plan because the energy savings solely on the heat loss means a reduction on approximately 140 gigawatt hours, which correspond to more than 6,000 individually heated detached houses. It's also a good economic business case to convert steam to water because there is a huge reduction of heat losses and thereby, of course, fuels. And furthermore, the operation cost will be reduced since the old steam installations formerly have been very expensive to replace and maintain. The maintenance costs for steam pipes alone are 10 times more expensive than normal pipes for water. And it is expected that the cost for the district heating will be reduced by almost 100 million euros a year. The district heating network is expected to be based solely on water in 4 years' time in 2021. And it means that more than 100 kilometers of pipes have been replaced, and the same has the old steam plant. The total investment cost will be around 250 to 300 million 250 to 300 million euro. But at the same time, we have to adjust our general energy production as well, though. This is a breakdown of the reductions in energy production. Our reductions in carbon emissions mostly are due to the shift from coal to biomass. It's important to note that in the case of biomass, it's a bit more complex of a calculation than simply using any kind of biomass to burn. To put it simple, there is no real sense in simply chopping down the forest of Latvia for us to be heated here in Denmark. And that has been the traditional solution. For me, to implement biomass in a sustainable energy production means to take biomass that would otherwise not be used, mass that cannot be recycled or would otherwise be wasted, only take them as part of the system. But even then, we always need to focus on whether this solution is truly sustainable, even though we have actually now developed a certification on sustainable biomass. But is it sustainable in the long run, or are we simply moving the problem from one sector to another? Currently, we only use wood chips from logging residue or trees from thinning, and we are very aware of not depleting forests, because forests can replenish these small interventions in a year. Obviously, wind is a huge factor as well. Currently, Copenhagen alone is investing 800 million euro in wind turbines this year in and around Copenhagen. In 2015, 42% of Denmark's electricity was supplied by wind, and we even had a day with close to 140% of the demand being produced solely by wind turbines. But as we increase the share of wind energy, the call for flexibility becomes even more important, because it requires flexibility in the production and consumption itself, so other technologies can take over when the wind doesn't blow. We must opt for several technologies such as storage and heat pumps, which can be adapted to actual consumption. In our heat plant, Greater Copenhagen, we estimate that the corporate and economic conditions for any large-scale use of heat pumps in Greater Copenhagen area are unlikely to be present in the coming few years up to 2025. That means that we need to create a flexible energy system by increasing dynamics in the power stations and by increasingly establish heat storage facilities whereby heat can be stored and used when the need arises. Obviously, these are large-scale centralized solutions, but in order for us to be successful, we also need to engage Copenhageners and companies in our city. Copenhagen aims to cut its heat consumption by 20% in 2025. At the same time, Copenhagen will reduce electricity consumption by 20% in commercial and service companies and by 10% in households. Reducing the energy consumption according to these targets set in our climate plan has, I must admit, shown to be difficult. There is therefore an urgent need to accelerate measures that will reduce the energy consumption in buildings. One of our newest initiatives is the establishment of a partnership network called Energy Lab that will consist of the largest building owners, developers, and organizations within Copenhagen. In this network, the building owners are setting targets and engaging the municipality and each other in reducing energy consumption in their buildings. Within the network, best practice knowledge is shared between partners, and we are hosting workshops with a focus on specific topics such as ventilation or consumer behavior. A new benchmarking system is also developed, so it is possible to compare the buildings. After a little less than a year, the partnership today consists of 26 partners, which account for 10% of the total building stock here in Copenhagen. And for 2017 alone, our partners have set a target of reducing the energy consumption with 3%. Energy Lab has a great potential to grow even further, and we hope to increase the partnership to 40 during this year. This will account for 17% of the total building stock. That means a result in a 6,000 tons carbon emission reduction by 2025. But we also need to look inward as well. And we have found areas where the city of Copenhagen have been able to find substantial reductions by ourselves. 40 years ago, more than 10,000 high-pressure sodium lamps were installed in Copenhagen. They consume a rather large amount of energy, and in 2010, Copenhagen used 19.5 gigawatt hours just to light up the city. I know there is still a tendency to doubt the quality of LED lights, But we decided within the municipality to implement 20,000 luminaries with specially designed LED counterparts. The energy used for the lights within Copenhagen, we estimated at the time that we could have cut them in half by 2016. In reality, the reduction that we have obtained is 57%. The fixtures are monitored, controlled, and dimmed individually, and for 24,000 fixtures are monitored, turned on and off at cabinet level. Also for fixtures and poles, the system should basically be maintenance-free for 25 years. But obviously, lighting is not the only place to cut our carbon emissions. The city of Copenhagen has converted the majority of its car fleet into hydrogen and electrical fuels, and we are converting our buses to electricity to be completed in 2019, and garbage trucks will all be on alternative fuels in the future. We are seeing more and more potential in smart city solutions, and we are testing several solutions in real-life situations across the city. And then, of course, you will hear more about the project in Energy Lab Nordhavn in just a few minutes. Let me spend a minute on smart city solutions, because one of the test areas is actually encircling the city hall where I'm sitting right now. In 2016, we opened Copenhagen Street Lab here in the middle of the city. Street Lab is Copenhagen's test area for smart city solutions in real urban settings. The lab is developed in partnerships with companies like Cisco, TSC, and CityLym, and will be a showcase for the newest technologies within smart city and Internet of Things. It includes the busiest roads in Denmark, a road in Denmark, and a street that has been refurbished with priority for cyclists and pedestrians. Both of these, as well as the City Hall Square and a number of cross-car connecting streets, are part of the new urban lab. Several solutions are already up and running here. Among these are intelligent parking, smart waste management, sensors that detect humidity in plants, as well as of new ways of measuring air quality in cities. This is where we can work out all the kinks and bugs in new technologies, but it's also where we can create a direct impact for quality of life. The Street Lab allows us a unique opportunity to test solutions before Copenhagen opts in and scale the solution to a citywide scale. It allows users to feedback and to see advantages and disadvantages. And it allows companies to build up business cases ready for use and export. All in all, quite a good deal for all parties involved. However, as an administration, we must always keep our reservations rather than succumb to tech fascination. We must be aware of unwanted consequences for privacy in our tech solutions so that we do not suspend the citizens' right to privacy. In Copenhagen, we also put an emphasis on sharing solutions, ideas, know-how, and failures as well, because we know that our challenges aren't unique, and many cities have solved the same challenges in different ways, and we need to learn from each other. Thereby, we in Copenhagen have involved ourselves in several of the great and major city networks across the globe, simply because it's necessary to learn from one another. It's crucial for me that we share our solutions on a national and global level, because we all need to continuously learn. That's the only way I can see that we create a more sustainable future. And with these words, I'll hand over the floor to Torben, Ommen. Here you go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I'll just put this on. Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm from DTU Mechanical Engineering, as mentioned earlier, and I'm representing the Energy Lab Nordhavn project. I'm here today on behalf of Christopher Kreisen, who is the project manager, but who could not, unfortunately, not be here today. So yeah, I will start by putting Nordhavn on the map. So if you look to the top of this map, you'll see that Nordhavn is placed quite centrally in Copenhagen, and that's actually a quite big area compared to the old city. Nordhavn is a sustainable city. It's supposed to be a sustainable city in terms of energy supply and transportation. Over the next 50 years, Nordhavn will develop into a new district with 40,000 residents and 40,000 jobs. the ambition is to become an example of a future sustainable city, while we also hope that we can contribute to the city of Copenhagen's goal that Morten just mentioned of becoming a carbon neutral city by 2025. So, but we all know that this will require innovation in the urban design, and especially within the infrastructures, where there is some requirements. Nordhavn is built with a certification, a sustainable certification at the district level, which is the platinum grade, and that's the best you can achieve. So, in terms of energy efficiency, you can say that that Nordhavn, the city Nordhavn, is already very sustainable without the project on the top. So the project that I'm representing has the objective to develop new methods and solutions for design and operation of the future cost-effective integrated energy system based on Nordhavn as a globally visible real-life laboratory. So Nordhavn is the host, and we are trying to develop the energy technologies further, but we are there and we have to mind the people who actually live there, the 40,000 and the 40,000 that are supposed to work there. It's also interesting here to see that we didn't mention the energy efficiency very much in the objective, because we focused mostly on the cost effectiveness. So the long-term goals that we support is, of course, as mentioned also by Helle, that in 2050 Denmark will become independent of fossil fuels, and already by 2035 it was supposed to be fossil free in the power and heating sectors. Morten just mentioned that we will also be, as a city, CO2 neutral by 2025, and that we already by 2020 will have 50% wind in the grid. So how would a typical month look like if we have 50% wind in the grid? As you can see here, we have shown the wind power and the demand of electricity for the full month, and you can see the daily changes in the demand. And there are definitely areas here which should be highlighted. Especially we can see that there is a period of surplus production of wind, and there's an area where there's a deficit between the demand and the wind power. So this is an area where we need to add extra production of something different than the wind turbines. And there are also areas where the demand and the production has very steep differences. So the wind power is decreasing rapidly and the demand is increasing rapidly, and we need to be quickly, we need some supply technologies which can supply this change quickly. So the project contains many different partners. We have the municipality, and we also have Copenhagen City and Port Development on behalf of the authority. Then we have 3 different energy infrastructure companies. One is HO4, which in this project is representing the district heating side. Then we have Radius, which represents the electricity distribution, and Clean Charge, which represents charging of electrical cars. Then we have quite a few industrial and consulting engineers. I'll just mention them briefly. It's ABB, Danfoss, Glendimplex, Metrotan, and Fredslund. And then we have the university, which is DTU. Specifically, we are 3 different departments at DTU who is working on this project. It's civil engineering, mechanical engineering, where I'm from, and then Center of Energy and Electricity at the Electro department. Then we also have Power Lab in the consortium. The funding for most of the development comes from Energy Technology Development and Demonstration Program, and the budget overall is 19 million euros, and the funding that we received from this program is around 11 million euros. So let's look at what we are trying to develop. First of all, the prerequisite was, or the boundary condition was, that we expect to get a high amount of intermittent electricity production, either from wind turbines or from solar PVs. This will most likely limit the power grid operation, and we also expect that it will influence the heat and cooling grids, because these grids will somehow interact with the power grid, and they may provide some flexibility that the power grid cannot do on its own. Also, for all three types of grids, we have storage possibilities. Biggest in terms of energy is for the heating grid, but we also have some storage flexibility from a battery for the electricity side. From the heat side, we also have a lot of buildings that are part of the project, and they provide some sort of flexibility in terms of operating their heating supply in a more sophisticated way than what is usually done. And this, of course, has to influence how the users use the buildings. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we also have smart charging infrastructure as part of the project. This is mainly focusing on the power grid, of course. And we have smart network services, which could be, as pictured here, on an electrical heater. But we have many different, we've considered many different smart network services that could add flexibility to the system. On top of all of this, we have some integrated markets and control center, which will present signals to the different units that we consider when they should operate or when they shouldn't operate, in order for the system to deliver all the demands that is required. And we also log a lot of data. That's where the Power Lab DK is integrated. And we also have a showroom today it's in one of the highest buildings in Nordhavn, and there you can go and see in a few years' time how the system is operating with a live display. So right now we are focusing mainly on the Aarhus scale, which is the part of the project which is most developed at the moment. The Aarhus scale is the part that I have included here, which goes up to the first Kronløbsbassing, which is this part of the harbor where there's, as you can see, we have also a metro at this part. So I'll show you some of the buildings that we have part of the project, and it's typically the building the building owner who has agreed with us to put in these different sensors and different components. But we of course also have to agree with the different users of the building, or the people owning their own apartments, how to utilize their data and how to utilize the equipment that they have. So in the Teranova building, we have 10 apartments with smart control of heating systems. That's developed by Danfoss, or being developed by Danfoss. And we are also measuring the thermal capacity in 4 of the apartments. And the idea here is that we, by using a smart control system and by knowing a lot about the thermal behavior of the building, we can in principle store heat in the building deck and use at a later point in time without influencing the comfort temperature of the residents. When I have put here a date, it's because then this means that people have already moved into the building in the end of the previous year. We also have Frihavnstårnet, where we have 12 apartments with building automation. And this is something like remote controlled heating, so you can control your heating and your appliances and your light and your indoor climate on your telephone. And as you can see, this building is also already now in use. and we have Havnehuset, where we have demonstration of flexible district heating and low temperature district heating, and actually also another concept from Danfoss, which is a micro heat booster unit to operate together with the low temperature district heating. This is also a building where people have just recently moved in. I've not taken all of the different buildings where we have apartments and shown here. I think you get the point that we have many different types of technologies, and we have many different apartments where we have invested equipment and where we, together with the user, will try to obtain understanding of how these apartments are used and how much can be, for example, for this part of the heating system, how much can actually be used as the storage. We also have some larger installations in Nordhavn. We have the Copenhagen International School, where the building, the overall building is sort of an integrated energy management, has an integrated energy management system, and part of the reason why it has so is because the building is on all of the facade of the building there's a lot of solar PVs. So in order for everything to work efficiently, you need quite a lot of integration. And of course, being a school, they also need to have an appropriate atmosphere for the students to learn. Then we have the Lytters P-hus, which is a place to park your car. And in this house, we also have a battery installed, as I mentioned earlier. It's produced by ABB and in operation by Radius, and we have just had the startup of the battery. And then further out in Nordhavn, which is not in Aarhusgade Park, we also have the cruise terminals and UNICEF buildings, where they are converting from a boiler system for heating to a heat pump system with a large heat storage and electrical heaters, where there's a playground for some of these engineers. So the district heating, just to mention briefly that what Morten also mentioned, that we are departing from some older generations, and the oldest generation is based on steam, and then throughout the last 50 years the temperature has steadily decreased, while the energy efficiency continues to increase. And just now we have a proposal by Henrik Lund and some co-authors to go from the third generation district heating into something called fourth generation district heating. And here the temperatures of the forward stream are even lower than what we use today. So we have something like 50 or 60 degrees in the forward stream. And as you can see, this gives, if you look at the bottom of this slide, you can see that the first generation had a few technologies which were included, and as we increase in generation, you get more technologies which are applicable, and you also get more technologies which has a renewable aspect. So what we are trying to do here is to consider how much, how well could this fourth generation district heating work, and where should we be if we want to be cost efficient between third generation and fourth generation district heating. So, as I mentioned earlier, Danfoss has developed a heat booster substation, and I brought the pictures here because I think it's nice to see that this is, of course, not the final prototype, but this is development that is going on in the project as we speak, where there is a heat booster, a heat pump, and a large storage tank, which will be when it's finalized, will be installed in some of the buildings in Nordhavn. This specifically will be installed in one building. We are also considering how the performance of the overall district heating network is doing, And to do that, we have to invest in different measurement equipment. And you can see here the installation of the area heat meter that is being installed for the Aarhusgade quarter. And we also, in different buildings, have pressure transmitters to give us the idea about how the flow has been until the point of the building. I would just, at the end, like to mention two PhD projects that we are doing here at mechanical engineering. One is to consider how to optimally integrate district heating and district cooling when you take into consideration that we have a quite limited amount of heat sources, and that the heat sinks, meaning that the way the heat is utilized, has quite many different characteristics. So, as you may see from the illustration here, you may have a situation where you could provide cooling just from the seawater and from groundwater, but you could also integrate this with a heat pump and utilize both heating and cooling and propose a more efficient system. In this PhD, there is also development of system design for future scenarios, so that could be maybe not in 10 years' time, but in 30 years' time. The other PhD that is at mechanical engineering are looking at heat pump solutions for integration with district heating in a renewable energy system. And the focus here is mainly on how much flexibility can we add by integrating heat pumps in the energy system. And of course, the flexibility is related to how much do we have to supply for the electricity network or the electricity grid. And knowing that the heat pump can produce heat which is easily stored afterwards. And here we also have to take into account that the heat sources are not something that is simply obtained. It's the outdoor as we know it, and it can vary significantly from hour to hour, from day to day, and from month to month. So this was what I wanted to tell you today. One of the things that we try to focus on is to learn from integrating these technologies into the new city, and to show that they actually work. And we would like to, while we do that, we would like to provoke thoughts that could be on new technologies or on regulation issues. Yes, I would like to thank you for the time and give the word to Ksenia.
Thank you very much, Torben. And first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers. We heard so many great ideas and experiences today. Mark talked about the global goals and commitments and the role of energy efficiency in order to bridge the gap towards achieving them, and how global partnerships and global initiatives can bring different countries and cities together, as well as different partners and private sector. And Helle shared the experiences from Denmark and its success story, and emphasized the importance of long-term stable policy framework, effective combination of policy instruments, and enforcement of the regulation in order to achieve ambitious energy efficiency targets. Morten shared experiences from Copenhagen with its very ambitious goals to become carbon neutral within 9-year timeline, and shared the solutions which were implemented at the city level. And Torben presented an exciting project which is going to be a future sustainable city with solutions for sustainable energy and transport, the district of Nordhavn in Copenhagen. And it was very exciting to see how the district itself can support the long-term goals of the country and the city, and how energy efficiency ideas can be implemented at the level of the district and individual buildings. So with that, I would like to open the floor for the questions, and our speakers will be answering them as they come. So the format which we have been following in our webinars is that I will pose the question to a certain speaker, and we'll have some time for them to answer. And the first question will be to Helle. Helle, you shared the success story of Denmark. In your opinion, is there something particular about the country which determined its success, or do you think other countries in the world can follow a similar path?
Thank you for the question and the interesting presentation from Jens. Thank you. Each country is individual, of course, and each country has its history and background. But for energy efficiency, I think there are so many benefits. I'm now regretting that I didn't bring one of the slides that I wanted to, the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. Because energy efficiency is very cost effective, especially if you find the most low-hanging fruits in your country and try to implement measures that will help you implement them. So I think a lot of the measures that I mentioned, especially building regulation for new buildings. If you build new buildings, make sure that they are as economical, sound and energy efficient as possible. I think that is a must all around the world. Of course, Denmark's industry has developed a lot since the 70s. So each country there would be very, very different. One thing that I think has been very important and successful in Denmark is the close collaboration between partners. So both the political partners, but also that we invite in the private sector, other organizations, also knowledge institutions. When we make regulations, we make sure that they're made in collaboration. Because one thing is regulation, but regulation that is just paper and maybe not implemented or even known is not helping anyone. So I think that we have invited the private sector, for instance, in the building codes or in the voluntary agreement schemes for the companies, the large industries have been very important. Of course, it takes time. Those processes aren't easy or neither fast, but they deliver. And I think that is of course, it's Denmark is rather small in size, but I think to get that network between industries, for instance, and between stakeholders in the sector, to spend time on that and make sure that they're involved in the formulation process is very important. And I think that can be actually a recipe across the globe. Of course, there are different fights and different historical background for each country. But I do think it's important for the long-term impact. I could mention a lot of other things, but I think to give room for others, this should be my most important answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helle. That's indeed very insightful. And the next question goes to Morten about Copenhagen. Morten, can you elaborate a bit more? How does Copenhagen elaborate with the national government on its initiatives, and how does it align its efforts with national policies and targets?
You can say that in many ways is one of the interesting questions, if I should answer a little bit diplomatically, especially for the moment, where you can say that the national government of Denmark in so many ways have other objectives than the one we are pursuing in Copenhagen. basically, I think in Copenhagen we feel that we are on our own, politically at least, compared to the will of the national government. That goes in so many ways in utilities, energy production, and especially in transport. So all the solutions that we are trying to implement for the moment, we don't really feel we are being helped by national government. Basically, you can say that we are cooperating as much as possible with everyone who wants to cooperate with us. But it's also certain that when it comes to, for instance, the conditions for setting up wind turbines, for setting up energy production that is sustainable, then we do have some problems in actually finding good partners on a national level, and there we cooperate more with cities around Europe, around the world, actually, to find new and better solutions, to be honest. I don't find that we are given much help or much cooperation from the current national government.
Thank you very much, Torben, for sharing your diplomatic insights. The next question is for Mark. Mark, how does your organization collaborate or support any of small island states in their struggle with energy access and other related energy matters where energy efficiency plays a significant role in mitigating their greenhouse gas emissions?
Okay, thanks for the question. Yeah, I think if you can remember back to my presentation about Sustainable Development Goals and then Sustainable Development Goal 7, you might recall the 3 pillars of that, which is about doubling renewable energy in the mix, doubling the rate of global energy efficiency improvement, and also creating universal energy access. These goals aren't separate to each other. They actually relate to each other in many ways, and we're very aware of the role of energy efficiency as a multiplier, if you like, on the other goals. So energy efficiency actually helps us to achieve the goal of energy access much more effectively than looking at, for example, rolling out new access to energy using very inefficient equipment. So this is a clear link that's been made, and we do look at that in the context of places where there is limited access to energy. That means a focus on Africa and South Asia, but also small island developing states, as the question asker has suggested. So we do look at the role of energy efficiency in achievement of renewable energy goals and also access goals. The question about whether we do much in those small countries comes back to our need to be a little bit selective around where we can have the most impact. There are certain reasons, though, for looking at those small countries, and it could be, for example, in looking at what funding is available for sort of projects that might be specific to those communities. The sort of thing that I'm talking about is, for example, the Green Climate Fund, which has a specific allocation for projects in small island developing countries. You know, there are a couple of reasons why you would look at that. We've certainly done some work in places like the Dominican Republic, where we're looking at retrofitting of street lighting and how that could work in the context of their needs, and looking at how you can extend access there using efficient equipment. So there is some work that we've done there, and you know, but I guess overall our work is focused on where we can have the biggest impact in bigger economies.
Thank you, Mark. We have a question to Torben as well. Torben, you presented very advanced technologies implemented in the district of Nordhavn. Do you think this kind of project can be replicated in other countries as well? And what to do to the countries which might not have the access to such advanced technologies? Can they still have this kind of sustainable energy projects?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, so first of all, I would say that many of the ideas that we have here interlink electricity, heating, district cooling, and transportation. And well, I know very well that many countries do not have district cooling and do not have district heating. but some of the conclusions that we present could very well interlink electricity and transportation in other countries as well. The knowledge about how the different technologies interact is definitely something that could be done also without the heating and cooling technologies. So that was the first part of the answer. But could you remind me about the second one?
So the second part was if countries do not have access to the most advanced technologies, can they still do some sustainable energy projects, and what would be your advice on that?
Yeah, definitely they can. I mean, I've witnessed projects in Indonesia, for example, where there's definitely a lot to learn also for people like me. So definitely they can, but the specific project would have to depend on the country, of course.
Thank you very much, Torben. We're coming to the end of our webinar, but just maybe as a last wrap-up, I would like maybe to ask each speaker to give the most important thing in their view in relation to the topic of our webinar. So we're looking at the links between different levels where energy efficiency can be implemented, starting with global goals, going to national policies, city-level initiatives, and basically projects on the ground. So, in your opinion, what is the most important thing which we have to keep in mind when designing energy efficiency efforts? I will probably start with Mark. Mark, what's your opinion on that?
Thank you, Ksenia. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fascinating topic, and in some ways we're just scratching the surface of what's going on. I've learned a lot of things today, and I appreciate the perspectives of all of the speakers. Our work is often global, and it's expressed very broadly, but I suppose my reflection is that everybody needs to have a motivation towards the activity, and that motivation is not necessarily aligned between the different levels, as we've heard. I think it's easy to assume, coming from the level that the frame of reference that you have will be reflected all the way down to the local level, and that's not always the case. So a re-emphasis or refocusing on what motivates us working not only at the global level, but then how is that reflected and translated down to national and local and individual levels. This is an area that we need to think about more carefully in terms of how we create this alignment. So, I think, yeah, a lot of reflections on different parts, but that's my feeling about that alignment of motivation that we need to work on more.
Great. Thank you very much. Helle, would you like to tell us what is the most important thing in your opinion?
The key takeaway from me, except those I've already brought, would be a combination of measures. Like if you only put tax on the energy used to make sure that they don't use it, then maybe you won't achieve your goal. There should be a stick, yes, like a tax incentive, but there should also be a carrot, like a subsidy. So you can put tax, and then you can make an agreement with, for instance, the companies or industries, and make them identify the key possible energy efficiency opportunities, make a long-term agreement, 5 years maybe, 4 years, and then give them the carrot that if they implement it, then they will get that tax reimbursed, at least as it worked in Denmark. So a combination of measures, and do remember some information is needed even though it can be difficult to measure the specific effect. That's what I think. And also this will be important for the policies that you want to implement in the long run. And thank you for all those who've listened and the presentations.
Thank you very much, Helle. I would like to give the floor to Morten. Morten, can you share your ideas about that?
Well, first of all, I think what I say to most of my colleagues around the world is just get started. Basically, you will never regret it, because going green also means spurring so much innovation, creating new jobs, really renewing your economy in a way that the city should not be without. So for a city, really to be part of the future, and also be part of creating a new your own economy, and really making sure that regardless of economic or financial crises that you're able to pull through, then the green innovation is a key part. That I think is one thing we have shown in Copenhagen, that greening, transforming the economy into a green economy has really been the basis of Copenhagen's economy throughout the last decade.
Thank you very much, Morten. Torben, could you share your view?
Yes, of course. So I would say that from an academic perspective, I've really enjoyed viewing as the different companies that are part of our project have started to understand each other's problems. They have really started to innovate and to make new solutions where I did not imagine they would make solutions. So I think it's a matter of combining different companies with different perspectives into some overall framework, and that should of course be focused on energy efficiency.
Thank you very much. This is great wrap up for our webinar, and it has been very inspiring to hear the experiences from very different levels, and to explore a little bit how they are connected to each other, and how what are the opportunities and challenges for interactions between different levels at which energy efficiency is being implemented. As I mentioned, we are going to continue having this kind of webinars for different countries and different cities, and see how this process is happening in in other settings. And I told you that we upload all webinar materials on our knowledge management system under e-learning section. You can find it. You will also receive a notification very soon once we upload all the materials, so that you can just follow the links and access them. I would also like to thank all the participants who joined the webinar and stayed till the very end on Friday afternoon, in Europe at least. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a nice weekend. Hope to see you soon on other webinars. Goodbye.